Hi, moving on now to Chapter 4, Section 3, Depression and Suicide. I did touch base a little bit in the beginning about clinical depression and whereabouts, how you need to get help for any type of mental disorder. But when you're also now reading about Section 3 about clinical depression, there are some risk factors in here. It could also be genetic when it comes to depression. All right, to a point. Major life changes or altercations that occurred in your life can be a factor of your depression, like if you were sexually abused or physically abused as a child, or you saw something really traumatic happen, possibly even war, like some people who live in countries that have a lot of war going on. Huge witness to a violent crime, and of course, feeling hopelessness. You're feeling hopeless, and those are factors that you need to get help on. So you want to be reading that part of Section 3, and then you're going to be moving on to the do's and don'ts to help someone who has suicidal thoughts. So the next portion is self-injury and suicide prevention. So there's a whole bunch on this regarding suicide and suicide prevention. Unfortunately, I do have a good friend that has always dealt with this. It's really sad. I've known her since I was like 14, and she always gives me permission to talk about this with my health students because she wants me to, pay it forward. And if someone can learn from her situation, her story, then it makes her feel better. But it's an ongoing thing that she has to deal with. So when it comes to self-injury, it's cutting, people who cut themselves, with razors or pens, for some reason in their mind, that pain that they're putting onto their body is making them feel better. So right there, that tells you that things aren't connecting properly. Also, it could be a sign of attention. They're trying to get attention. If someone is saying they're going to kill themselves or they're thinking of killing themselves, you need to literally point blank ask them. Okay, like for example, Susie Joe, are you really serious that you want to kill yourself? If she says yes, then you need to stop, call 911. You need, to get help. There's a lot of preventions that are occurring for suicide. Like I think October, maybe. One of the months is Suicide Prevention Month. I apologize that so much stuff's going on. I don't remember specifically what day, or what month. But the fact of the matter is, if you know someone, you need to help them as much as you can. I, of course, don't blame them, but I'll talk about that in a second. Some risk factors regarding suicide would be, of course, there's an abundance of mental disorders, maybe a combination of OCD, depression, something drastic happened in their life. Like my friend, unfortunately, she was sexually abused by her father. So right there in itself tells you there's an issue, and all her life she's been dealing with it. And of course, her family, unfortunately, did not accept that this happened to her. They pretty much blamed her as a child. And throughout her years of getting married and having kids herself, she's always had issues of self-worth, feeling worthless. She's took antidepressants, sometimes overdosed on them. She sometimes would use alcohol with her antidepressants. So it was just really, really crazy at times. And seeing a therapist while this is happening, she's tried multiple times of killing herself. She would call me and be like, I'm going to go, Leslie, right now, and I'm going to drive over the bridge, and then I would have to stop my life and go try to find her. It was very traumatic, even for my family. But fortunately, she's still with us, and she's at times gets help, but at times she still does deal with her mental issues. Come to find out that she is bipolar and is clinically depressed. So she has a gamut of things, and she can't mix medicine with alcohol and other drugs. So just keep praying that she's doing, better every day. But it's a factor. It's affected our friendship. It's affected our family and her own kids. So you need to get, help as much as you can for that individual. So there's some protective factors involved. Cluster suicide. So that's when basically a series of suicides have occurred, either in a group setting, like cults, unfortunately, or kind of like... what's the word I'm thinking of? Not just students, but people will try to do what the other person did because they're getting attention. So like my first year teaching wasn't here at Anchor Bay. It was a different district. It was weird because unfortunately, a student passed away. And unfortunately, it was a really young freshman girl, and her sister used to throw for me for track and field. So I went to this funeral on behalf of my athlete, even though I didn't know her sister. And come to find out it was about a boy. He didn't like her, or he didn't even know her. But all of a sudden, she got notoriety. This is way before the internet and social media and stuff like that. But people were talking about her and all that, and other girls or other people that, it was girls, unfortunately, got wind that, oh, people are all going to her funeral. She's popular now. And it was so weird because, like, let me think here. It's been a while now, over 20 years. I want to say within a 6-week span, almost every weekend, there was a suicide at the high school that I used to teach at. I'm not lying. It was so bad and sad that, again, mind you, pre-social media, pre-cell phones, well, it was like leave the answer and your answer machine kind of thing, or you get that phone call at 3:00 in the morning for emergency staff meetings. The social workers and the counselors at that particular high school would literally have us teachers pass out at the end of the day those lifesaver candies. And they would have the hotline number on it for suicide prevention. And we would have to give it out to every student on Fridays, hoping and praying that, hey, here's a lifesaver, have some candy. And there's the 800 number hotline if you need help. It got really bad. It was really sad to the point where that particular high school was known as Suicide High. Yeah, it was really sad. So those are types of cluster type of suicides that people will do. And of course there's prevention involved where you just, again, do not be afraid to ask for help. On your notes that I've downloaded for you, there's do's and don'ts. So if someone is thinking or feeling of suicidal thoughts or tendencies or attempts, okay, there's some things that you should and should not do. So we're going to go over the don'ts first, because I always like to end on a positive. And again, mind you, I've personally been through a lot of these because of my friend that I've known since I was 14. So don't dare the person to commit suicide. Don't say, hey, I dare you. Don't dare them to do this. Not at all. Don't judge them. It's really hard not to judge people in general. Do not judge that person who is having these thoughts. You have no idea what is going on in their life. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But overall, even if you do know a little bit, like I knew about my friend, I could never understand the full in depth of how she was feeling because of being raped by her father. Okay. Don't analyze the suicidal person's motives. You're not a therapist. I'm not a therapist. So don't analyze it. Don't judge them. Don't analyze it. Don't argue with them. Don't try to convince them in any way. Because again, you want them to be safe, but they want to be heard. Do not keep the person, do not leave them alone. Do not allow the person to have destructive thoughts. Like if they're like, oh, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, I'm going to do it. No, talk them down, right? And don't ever, ever leave a person who has suicidal thoughts. Don't ever leave them, ever leave them. Back to my friend, there was multiple times where her children would call me, and they were friends like we've known forever. So her kids would call me Auntie, so on and so forth. And they would call me and they'd be like, Auntie Leslie, we need you to call, Mom's having an episode, or get over here, that kind of thing. So it's always hard for me to teach this year about this subject matter, but because it brings back that day or a couple of days. There was a time when her children called me. At this time, I think she's 4, and at the time, her youngest was maybe like a 5th grader, and the oldest was probably 19. So I walked into her bedroom, and there was her bathroom, and she literally was just sitting there in her chair, and her eyes, it was really weird. It was like, I don't know if you ever watched like supernatural TV shows, and like the eyes are black if they're a demon, I looked at her and it wasn't her. I knew it wasn't her. It just did not look like her body language, everything. And she literally had scissors on her neck, and like she was going to stab her neck. And of course, inside I'm freaking out, but I can't show that to her. I can't show that to her children. So I just took a deep breath. I went over there and I was like, not today. I took the scissors from her neck. I said, this is not happening today. Moved the scissors out of her way of reach, called 911, and that particular moment she did get help. Okay, but that was one of many attempts. Multiple times that my husband and I would have to help her husband go find her drive around the community. Sometimes we found her, sometimes we didn't. Sometimes she'd come back home. The last incident was, but every time I talk about this, I sometimes kind of get, but it's a true story. I tell you guys true stories. I'm not going to lie to you. True stories sometimes teach people more than just reading a book. So my one nephew called, and it was weird because he just said Auntie Leslie, and I was like, I knew. So my husband and I dropped everything. Our kids were home. They were old enough to, be home alone. They just, where we live. And the one son was in the, I want to say like an office, and he's just rocking back and forth. And I'm like, oh no. And the other son, was like, she's upstairs. So I'm like, okay, I went back upstairs to her room. And then there's my other nephew holding his mom, literally limp like a noodle. And I thought she was dead. I get over there, and I'm like, told my husband, call 911. I grabbed her, put her on the floor, and she was barely breathing. And my nephew, who was holding her, was just like comatose. He was just like numb. And I'm like, I started doing rescue breathing on her. My husband was talking to 911. And fortunately, she's still alive today, fortunately, which is good. Very traumatic. If I really want to think about it, I have issues with it still to this day. It's been probably, I don't know, I want to say 5-6 years that the incident happened. But so yeah, she ended up going to a hospital and staying there for a while and got evaluated and so on and so forth. But yeah, she's still here. She's still having issues. But yeah, it's affected our relationship, of course. I'm not trying to toot my horn, but yeah, I saved my friend. But our relationship's definitely different. Not that I'm mad at her or anything, but she just needs help. So don't ever leave the person alone. Please call 911. Here are the do's. Okay, so let's try to move on to something a little positive. Someone is having suicidal thoughts. Sorry about that. Okay, so you want to trust your feelings if you believe the person is suicidal. Do not be afraid to ask them or say to them, are you really going to hurt yourself? Hurting yourself and killing yourself are two different things. Hurting themselves could be like, cutting, killing yourself. Are you going to really follow through? And if they say yes, you need to go and call 911. If they're like, well, I don't know, still, if they're continuously having those behaviors, you need to call 911. Take the situation seriously. Take it seriously. Tell the person that is suicidal that you love them, you're concerned about them, you're not going to leave them, you're here for them. Again, do not judge them. Listen to them very, very carefully. All right? They may not be saying things that are quote unquote normal. They may be having tangents of this, talking this way and talking that way, or just bits and pieces of things you may not even understand. Trust me, been there. Didn't understand a lot of things that it was when I had to deal with some issues. But just listen and do not leave them alone. Always talk calmly. Don't raise your voice. Find professional help because heck, I was in my 40s and it was hard for me to handle it. Stay with them until help comes. Okay, stay with them till help comes. All right, so you want to make sure that you're reading that portion. You do the section questions as well. And again, if you or anyone is feeling or has thoughts of suicide tendencies or hurting yourself or injuring yourself or any kind of negative thoughts that you feel that you are not worthy, you need to seek help. You need to ask for help. Do not be afraid to ask. This is Help in Sign Language. Do not be afraid to ask for help because you are worthy. All right, take care.